All right. I think we're live right now. Bobby Digital, welcome in. Let's get a few of these links sent out, and then we will get right into it, into the college football playoff. How are we doing, Bob? We're here just about to kick off the second half, Monday Night Football. Any thoughts on that game so far that you've seen?
Woo. Detroit defense. We've talked about it on some of the Twitter spaces recently. All those injuries. I mean, you just really see it coming to fruition right now. I have a feeling I'm going to really like the Vikings here on the reopen here in a couple hours for Sunday night next week. If I'm getting some points on that one. Saw Sam Laporta get banged up a little bit there. So just kind of interested how that looks. In the second half, maybe looking at some prop unders here while we're doing the show here on Laporta. But so that's just something I might take a look at. But yeah, impressive half of Brock Purdy and the Niners offense down 4 offensive linemen. And but yeah, that Detroit defense is a huge takeaway.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, without further ado, we will get into the college football weekend matchups, which kick off tomorrow night. Starting off, been a lot of mixed feelings so far about the playoff. People like to act like they've never seen a blowout before. Certainly in a playoff format, but the truth and the reality is we've seen plenty of blowouts and playoffs every year, even in the 4-team format. We see blowouts in the NFL playoffs all the time as well. So certainly nothing new. It's not exciting. It's not what we want to see, but it happens. It kind of just goes along with the territory of having some of the really, really higher end teams in there. So, what I guess before we go game by game, I'm going to take the Ohio State Oregon off the board because that obviously is the the star of the show here. But which game do you think stands out to you as maybe the most intriguing, or the one that you're looking forward to the most outside of that one?
I think it's Notre Dame Georgia. Still is kind of the most intriguing game. Just because I think with Carson Beck being out, which of course we'll talk about a bit later, I just think it's an interesting game to handicap and think about because there's just lots of different ways it can go. Notre Dame kind of thinks of themselves as like, they want to jump back up into that like A tier of college football. And even if this is not as good a Georgia team as maybe the national championship team that smoked TCU, a win here for Notre Dame would still in their minds put them in that upper echelon back again. To maybe thinking they can have kind of nice little run there. So fascinating from that perspective. So that one down in the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans to close out the quarterfinal round, the quarterfinal round here is the one I have my eyes on most, besides Ohio State, Oregon.
All right, no, that's great. So we'll start with the matchup tomorrow night in the Fiesta Bowl. Boise State facing off against Penn State. Boise State obviously had the first round bye, which, whether deserving or not, they did. Penn State, very impressive and convincing win over SMU. Really kind of dominated that one, wire to wire. What are you looking for most here in this one? We have Penn State. Let me get some of these lines up here. Here we go. So we have Penn State laying 11 points. The total sitting at 53.5 right now. What do you like here? Or I guess what kind of matchups are you kind of keying in on here in this Boise State, Penn State?
Yeah, kind of first keying in on, so when Penn State has the ball here, thinking about the Boise defense, not a unit that I feel is very strong. The defensive line is a great havoc unit. They're top 5 in sacks. They can really get out after it, but of course that's against Mountain West competition. One of the key factors here is going to be that Boise's defense is among the worst teams in the country as far as tackling, 133rd out of 134 FBS teams. They also they have a missed tackle rate of about 20%, which ranks 134 out of 134. So because of this, they give up, quite a bit of explosives. Secondary is much maligned. It's only faced one top 50 passing attack, and that was Oregon in week 2. And if you remember, at the start of the year, Oregon started off a little slow. Dylan Gabriel getting used to the offense. They had some offensive line injuries coming out of camp. So that's kind of a different Oregon team than the one we're seeing today. Pass defense is 115th in EPA per pass allowed. That's against the overall 83rd strength pass defense schedule. So not very good there. Drew Allard, the Penn State quarterback, is really good at deep and intermediate ball thrower, and I think it'd be wise for them to take some shots, especially off play action, to kind of switch up the pace on that Boise defensive line. Also should be a good opportunity over the middle of the field for Mackey Award winner Tyler Warren, the stud do everything tight end there. And then, on the ground, Penn State's running backs. I mean, everyone's going to talk about, Genty, and we'll get to him in a second, but Singleton and Allen, I mean, that's one of the best running back duos in the country. Boise's rush defense has been solid, but again, we're talking about the Mountain West here. We haven't seen this kind of athletes, this kind of size on the lines here. And Penn State's offense is quite frankly more of a success rate offense instead of it's not that explosive. But if Boise's going to not tackle at the second level, especially these backs get there, those tackling issues could show here, and you could see Penn State score some points.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was going to get at is, some of the numbers might look okay for Boise on defense, but you certainly begs the question, what kind of offensive firepower are they going up against? I heard something earlier this week that was kind of interesting, as obviously we'll get into the Ohio State game, but kind of talking about how when Harbaugh was at Michigan and James Franklin arrived at Penn State kind of around the same time. And they both, obviously everybody's kind of aiming upward at Ohio State as, hey, this is the team that kind of we need. This is the target. And both of those coaches went about it completely different ways, where Harbaugh decided we're going to start from the inside out and we're going to beef up and we're going to get really big and physical and we're going to manhandle them down the trenches, offensive and defensive line. And that's how we're going to play smash mouth, old school bully ball. And that's how they did it. And it obviously worked to some extent. Penn State, on the other hand, with James Franklin, decided we're going to try to match the speed that Ohio State has. We're going to get these, top of the line athletes at skill positions, running backs, wide receivers. We're going to try to match them tit for tat on the speed side of things. And that didn't necessarily go quite as well, I guess, as the Harbaugh strategy. And there are a lot of other reasons for that. It's not just the strategy alone, but, I felt like when they went about it that way, they always still were a tick slower than Ohio State. Now, having said that, they still have this team built the same way as all those other Penn State teams have been. And I just can't imagine. I mean, this speed is something that Boise State has not seen. They have not seen a team that is this fast or this athletic on the outside. I don't know how they are going to slow down these Penn State receivers on the outside. And then defensively, I think they're going to have to pass the ball a lot more. I imagine Penn State, Genty, as good as he's been, I just can't see, as we kind of covered before, not to just completely discredit what he's done or what Boise State's done, but it wasn't against teams like Penn State week in and week out. So if that kind of gives a hint as to which direction I see this game going, we'll get it. I'll let you give your read first and your pick, what you like here the best, and then I'll go with mine.
Yeah. Flipping over to Boise, when Boise has the ball, I think we talked a little bit about previously, Genty being a bit banged up kind of towards the end of the year. And I think Boise having that bye, getting 3 weeks here to kind of nurse those injuries, because he was also going for not only just the Heisman, but Barry Sanders' record. And so, getting those 3 weeks off to healthy and reset, I think is going to be good for him. Penn State, good run D, which I take seriously in the Big Ten, just based on the style of teams that play in that conference. I prefer that way more than I do, Penn State's passing numbers, which look really good, but look at, kind of how passing attacks have been in the Big Ten for a long time there. But I do kind of keep thinking about the Ohio State game for Penn State in my mind. When Ohio State went to run the clock out in that game, they wanted to play some bully ball. They were able to execute 11 plays, all runs, and they took off the final 5 minutes and 13 seconds on the clock to finish that game in Happy Valley. So that's just something that's in the back of my mind when I think about this Penn State rush defense. I do expect Penn State defensive coordinator Tom Allen to dare Madsen to beat them. Boise's been competent in the passing game, and Penn State secondary is something I'm not high on. Madsen overall, he's fine. He's done his job. He's a team built around
That's giving him a lot of credit. That's giving him a little too much credit, because when I saw them play, I saw some pretty poor quarterback play. But at the end of the day, they didn't need it. They just kept pounding with the Ashton Jeanty sledgehammer, over and over and over. And Madsen wasn't asked to do that much. But whenever he was, what I saw was not pretty.
Yeah, so obviously built around the dynamic running back that you mentioned, and his job was to not lose you a game and make a couple throws. He didn't. I think he had 3 turnovers on the year. Kevin Jennings, SMU, lost them the game. He lost SMU the game, at Penn State, and all that. Madsen, outside. So Boise and Madsen. So here's something to consider here. Outside the top 100 in efficiency on obvious passing downs. Against the most comparable opponent to Penn State, which again, Oregon was a different team in week 2. Madsen was 17 of 39 for 147 and a minus 0.2 EPA per play or APA per pass and a 28% passing success rate. So again, not great here on that. And of course, I question also this Boise offensive line. Now, the left tackle Casey's their best offensive line player. But overall, the unit's allowed a 22% pressure rate. It's outside of the top 50. And while Casey will be matched against Abdul Carter, Penn State's best defensive lineman, the other guys are good too. So Penn State can get after the passer here, slow down Jeanty because they have a good rush D and they can load the box. Man, you could potentially game script Jeanty out. There's
right. And that's the thing that can't, if Penn State jumps out early, as they kind of tend to do, what's Boise going to do? You can't just keep trying to force the run if you're down in a 21-0 hole early, or 28-7, and it's going into halftime. You can't just keep trying to establish the run and get that going just because he's your main guy. And I don't know that I'm sure he can to some extent, but I don't know how capable he is as a pass catcher out of the backfield. And as far as getting downfield, right. So I don't know.
They kept going for rushing stats with him. So there was a couple games where they used him, but not, it wasn't his main job. It's not like
right.
Which we'll talk about the next game, but
and that's the thing. It looks great in the box score, and they, hand it off to him a million times a game, and just kind of let him run between the tackles and do his thing. But it just, I don't know that it was all that. It's not something that you can necessarily replicate when you get kind of up to the big boy table here. When you start facing teams like Penn State, right. It's just kind of a different story, and the game plan, I should say, has to be adjusted, and I don't know that they have that in their arsenal. So I'll ask you if you are leaning anything side or total here in this game, particularly on Friday night.
Yeah,
not Friday night, Tuesday night. It feels like a Friday night. Yeah,
right. Yeah, having these games and having off work and all that stuff. But just kind of talking about the market first. There's been a battle, I feel like, on this total. You've seen it kind of ping pong around between 52 and 54. Currently sitting at the 53 and a half range. Both these teams are a bit slower paced, both outside of the top 90 in pace. So I know some respected bettors on both sides of the total here. I know a couple who like the Penn State team total over more, just because there's a little bit more questions with the Boise. How much can Boise put up on there? So that's just something to consider there. And on the side, I mean, we've stayed mostly 10.5, 11 all week on that. Unfortunately, and I know what you're gonna kind of get into here. I kind of lean towards what the angle you're looking at a bit, but for me, I'm honestly not going to play anything on that. Maybe some first half Penn State, and some Penn State alts, but for me on this one, sometimes the big college football playoff games don't always lend to the biggest betting opportunity. I'm close on the number here, and I really like the Penn State matchup. Sometimes I usually like to go have both those things kind of line up a bit, for a bet. So lean a little bit Penn State, but I haven't played anything to this point.
And that's the thing in these big national spotlight games, the market is already pretty dialed in. It's going to be pretty efficient at this point. So it's more about, all right, how do you feel? Do you have stronger conviction one way or the other? Because you're not going to see a whole lot of wiggle. You're not going to see a lot of movement, and you're not likely to get a whole lot of closing line value on most of these, at least not on the side. Maybe on the total, but not as much on the side. So, with that in mind, the angle I looked at is the same way that I looked at the SMU game with Penn State, which is looking at, seeing them laying 11. That's a dead number as far as I'm concerned. You're not going to see a whole lot of games land on 11. So what do we do there? We look to an alt number. So when they played SMU, I saw that as the same type of mismatch that I see here, physically, athletically. It's a major step up in class from what they're used to playing against. So I went ahead. I took Penn State minus 14 in the SMU game. Here, I took them again, laying the 14 points, just because it's, you're getting a better number there. I got it at plus 116. I'm sure you could look around, get some better ones out there as well. But I just think, to me, that makes a little bit more sense. Lay 13, lay 14, lay something that's more likely to land on. I mean, might even put a sprinkle on, 21. Something to get, not a big position, but worth a little bit. Yeah, right. Just because if you see this game as a blowout, that 11 points it's mostly meaningless. So it's just better to kind of lay a little bit, sell some points back, get a better number, get yourself in a better position. And, that's just, I guess, kind of how I see that one. So unless you have any final thoughts there on the Fiesta Bowl, we can move into Saturday's first matchup in the afternoon, the Peach Bowl, Texas playing Arizona State. Texas coming in, they're, the top seeded team, or no, not they should have been. They were projected to be, but they're on the lower seeded team under Arizona State here, technically. Again, Arizona State kind of getting some of the same fortunes that Boise State did as far as the seedings go. But, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter as much at this point now that we're past the first round buys. No home field advantage. Playing this game on a neutral site. What do you like here? Arizona State, Texas. Kind of the same type of deal. Texas laying 12, total sitting at 51.5. Anything here that stands out to you?
Yeah, so starting off, just kind of thinking about Arizona State having the ball, and I think the big story that I don't think has been talked about enough here is Arizona State wide receiver Jordan Tyson is still being out. You didn't see it much it didn't matter as much in the Iowa State game because Iowa State refused to get out of their 3-3-5 defense, which allowed stud running back Cam Skattebo to run around and do whatever he wants, and allowed them to kind of put up a big number, and that game wasn't competitive. I have a lot of concerns about Arizona State's passing game beyond Jordan Tyson. Skattebo is their second leading receiver, and only 4 other players on Arizona State's team has more than 10 passing targets on the season outside of Tyson and Skattebo. So it's a very thin unit. 24% of Arizona State's passes on the season were screens, which of course Tyson, Skattebo, the other weapons as well. And of course, I really quite Texas's defense was something I was probably one of the most wrong things about going into the year. I was concerned about them losing 2 stud defensive tackles, concerns in the secondary. Both units have been outstanding. Top 10 rush defense. Clemson put up 24 points against Texas in the first round, but they didn't have any success running on the ground there. Arizona State's offensive line ranks outside the top 100 in run blocking grades, which again just speaks to how good of a season Cam Scatabo has had. He probably deserved to be in New York for a Heisman like this in the ceremony, sitting with Travis Hunter and everyone. So I just think it speaks to how good he is there. Now, like I said, Arizona State does get Scatabo going in the passing games on screens, but I think they will need to be 2-dimensional here for a chance to have any success on that. Another key factor here that I want to mention, just kind of thinking about Arizona State having the ball, that I think will really play into this game. Obviously, Arizona State's playing with a little bit of house money. No one thought they'd be in the playoffs. Win total 4.5. Just coming out of some sanctions from the Herm Edwards era. They've had tryouts in November for kicker. They've had 3 kickers this season.
Yeah, kind of put out a call for help to campus. It was like, hey, if anybody on campus wants to come out and give it a shot, here's the time in the field to find us on. Come out and see if you can kick.
Right. 9 of 17 of field goals on the season. In a game where they're, 2 touchdown or, just a hair under 2 touchdown dogs here. Does that mean Arizona State goes for it more? In those, in that 4th and 5 range, knowing that they probably need to convert 7s instead of 3s, and the 3s are questionable. So that's just something to consider when Arizona State has the ball. And that's kind of my first thought and how key the loss of Jordan Tyson is for the Sun Devils.
Yeah, no, definitely. And a team that is already feels light on weapons, considering how much of this offense seems to run through Cam Scatabo. It's like they run to him, they throw to him. I mean, it's just kind of I don't want to say that he's there, and he's certainly the engine of this offense, and then some. I think he's a little bit more multidimensional actually than maybe an Ashton Jeanty is, at least from what we've seen asked of him from an offensive perspective. But again, kind of feel the same way. I mean, this guy puts up video game numbers. He's been putting up incredible stats all year long out of the backfield, but not against Texas defense, not against this front four. This team, this Texas program that pumps out defensive line, NFL defensive linemen year after year. I don't know. I just don't know that Scatabo has that escapability. I don't know that he has the breakaway speed or the wiggle, the shiftiness to kind of escape some of these big bruisers that Texas has on their defensive line. What do you think there as far as I just think it's a big mismatch. I think Texas is going to be able to take away what they want to do and what their main driving force of their offense is. And I don't think that they really have any other answers. How do you feel?
Yeah, I think it'll be a kind of for Arizona State, it'll be kind of 4th down and red zone roulette for them. If they hit, roll 7s or whatever it is, if they get 7s and all that, then they could probably stay in this game on the offensive side because, and we'll get to it here in a second. I really don't know if they can get stops on Texas.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's, I don't know how much they're going to be able to move the ball a whole lot. And as far as getting stops, we have certainly, we've both kind of discussed some concerns that we might have with Quinn Ewers and him kind of not being great, at least ever since he got injured early in the season. I don't know that he has kind of looked right.
I was impressed by the Clemson game.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really the first time in a while that he has looked, has really played at that level. I would say, I do still think we're going to see some Arch Manning packages. I think they're going to continue to kind of utilize him and bring him in for certain series. Now, especially if Quinn Ewers kind of is a little shaky, I don't think they're going to hesitate to kind of throw Arch in, inject some life into the offense, and they might just kind of rotate those guys back and forth. But I don't think it's going to matter ultimately either way, whoever's out there. But I don't know. How do you feel there?
Yeah, the Arizona State defense has been kind of a sum of the parts unit. No individual stars, but the pass defense is outside the top 90 while facing no top 30 passing EPA opponents on the season. They also are outside the top 120 in sack rate, which quite frankly leads to the idea that, banged up Quinn Ewers, kind of we've talked about where him recovering for some, an ankle and oblique injuries, he's going to have some time in the pocket. A couple offenses that are worse than Texas's, but here's kind of the point totals they put up on Arizona State. 28 from Texas State, 30 from Texas Tech, 31 from Kansas, 31 from UCF. Again, all of those are worse offenses than Texas. I think they put up some points here. And Texas, in training camp, lost a couple running backs. They've really started to find their running game with Wisner and Blue versus really anyone not named Georgia. Now, Clemson is especially weak against the run, so we kind of anticipated that they could get going in that matchup. But I mentioned, I thought Ewers looked the best he's looked since being injured midseason with the oblique and ankle injuries. And again, late season bye, and I know it technically wasn't a bye because they played in the first round, but having a couple weeks off, I thought really helped Ewers in this spot. Another thing that'll help him, Isaiah Bond, stud wide receiver for them. He's been practicing this week. I think he's going to be back and play for the Longhorns as their best wide receiver. But in his absence, I've looked what the other weapons did.
I was just really going to say that. Yeah. I mean, Texas puts in multiple wide receivers into the NFL almost every year. So it's, if not every year, every couple of years, they get multiple guys get drafted per, crop of wide receivers, from guys, the Adonai Mitchells, Worthies, like all these guys, like they just kind of constantly keep streaming these guys in that it's not really when Arizona State loses a guy like that, when Boise State loses a guy like that, it's a big deal because the next man up isn't quite at that level. When a Texas or a Georgia or, Ohio State, when they lose a guy like that, it's just kind of, all right, who's the next 5-star up? Who's ready to go? So I don't know. Maybe we'll see that change with the kind of developments of the transfer portal and guys kind of more, fleeing to more playing time. But as for the time being, there's, these teams are just too deep. So, I guess, so anything that if you wanted to get into the market as to what we've seen as far as movements, and then we could kind of get into what, best bets here for this one.
Yeah, as far as the market goes, we saw some early Texas money kind of taking that up, close to 14, and then we did see a big group take the Arizona State plus 14 out over the previous weekend here. But now it's sitting in that no man's land. At the end of the day, it's probably not going to touch a flat 10. It's probably not going to go back to 14. So I think it's very clear where the buy points are. So it'll be interesting to see where the big next move is. As limits continue to rise here, and you'll probably see some bigger money come in. I think we might see a Texas move, maybe sometime tomorrow morning, or maybe in games in 2 days. Sorry, but I think we'll see a Texas move on game day, at least taking out, maybe getting it back to 13, somewhere in that range. I think that's probably the right number. The total though has stayed completely stagnant. I mean, 51's a reasonable key in college. And you've seen some, 51 and a half, kind of depending on the book here. But you haven't seen too much movement on that one. So that's kind of where we are in terms of the market. I don't think we'll see a 14 again, and we definitely aren't seeing a Texas 10. Because I know I'll get involved if Texas 10 came up.
For sure. And, I don't feel as strongly as I do with the Penn State, Boise State. I still kind of lean towards that same mentality, though, of, if I was going to get involved, if I wanted to take Texas, I think alt line might be the way to go. Just lay the 2 touchdowns. Lay the 14. Get yourself a little bit of a better number there. And the only other thing that I was kind of thinking on this game was looking at Scatabo under maybe in the rush yards, because for 2 reasons. I think, as we kind of discussed,
like 99.5 out there.
Yeah, I've seen 99.5 everywhere that I've looked. It's like that same flat number. And I'm waiting a little bit just because I could see as we get closer in, and everybody's wanting to tack things into their,
SGPs.
Yeah, right. Everybody's trying to just add things into their SGPs. It's just like, oh man, Scatabo, look at this guy. He puts up, 200 yards a game, and throw this in. And I think maybe it might tick up slightly. But either way, I think that taking him under on the rushing yards, because as we said, Texas with that stout defensive line, I have a lot of faith in them being able to bottle up the run game. And then if and when they get out to a lead, that kind of removes some of the running game from the Arizona State game plan. I don't know that they'll be able to rely as much on the running from him. So that's where I kind of fall. What do you like here? Best bets, Arizona State, Texas.
So on one of them, I feel pretty strong. I really like the Texas team total over 31.5. You can get that -110, but as always, shop around. I know I looked right before the show here. 8 books here, all different numbers, different juices. Kind of consider everything there, but kind of going consensus here. Oh, Texas team total over 31.5. I think we'll see them put up a ton of points here. I don't want to worry about an alt spread or a cover here with kind of getting up there. It's right around where I make the number. I kind of make it 13, that 13 range, like it kind of suggested there. But so I like Texas to score some points here. So that one, and then kind of going off your Scatabo rushing angle, kind of playing into the Jordan Tyson comment that I mentioned earlier. I like Scatabo over 27.5 receiving yards a little bit. It's not one I bet yet, just to be honest with the audience here, but it's something I'm looking at and considering clicking. I know there's a couple shops with a couple different numbers out there, but 27.5 is something I'm looking at with Scatabo over in the receiving game, thinking that he's likely to get bottled up a little bit in the running game. Maybe they're playing from a negative game script and they have to use him, their best weapon, in alternative methods. So over 27.5, and like I said, Arizona State's big on the screen passes as well, and that's how they like to get him involved.
Yeah. Don't hate that. I think, what would you think? Maybe getting a little, threading the needle a little bit here. Maybe something to just throw a couple bucks on. But if you're able to, would you think about pairing an under on the rushing yards and an over on the receiving yards?
I think that would without running like correlations or anything. Like I think that's probably. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's
playing into that game script.
And that kind of occurred to me as we were just kind of talking through it, because I'm like, I took a Scatabo under, you took an over, but I still kind of see a world in which both of those could potentially hit.
Yeah.
So yeah, not like I would.
And I know our friend from the Wolf Spaces, the fantasy football Jeff. He always likes to talk about the combo platter.
Yeah.
Of rush plus receiving. That's one in this case. Like I would not do here. I would.
Yeah,
not
I know. I looked at that.
Platter.
Right.
I tend to agree with. I lean a little bit more towards the receiving over than the rushing under, but I don't mind that if I'm not a huge SGP guy, but that's one I'd consider.
Yeah, I just see Texas being able to get home quite a bit, even just rushing 4. They could just probably rush 4 and get home pretty quickly. Yeah. I don't know that Arizona State's going to be able to block. So with that in mind, I could see, if they're dropping back, just kind of letting a lot of things, kind of happen in front of them. Maybe some swing passes out to Scatabo. I could see him if the routes get deep enough, he could take one of those 25, 30 yards in one play. And that could happen, right before the half. It could happen at the end of the game when the game's kind of in hand and they're just kind of, Texas is somewhat in prevent mode. I could see them throwing a little swing route out to him and him, like I said, taking it 25, 30 yards. in one play. So anyway, yeah. So moving forward into really the meat and potatoes here
The main
of
event.
the Rose Bowl, the granddaddy of them all. We actually get a somewhat of a traditional Rose Bowl matchup
This
here.
Pac-12 Big Ten matchup.
Right.
Just waited.
Ohio State, Oregon. Right now, Ohio State the favorite, minus laying 2.5 points. The total sitting at 55. We did see these teams already match up once in Oregon and Eugene. Really a classic finish there. A game that could have gone either direction. Oregon ended up pulling out, I believe, a 1-point win.
32-31.
32-31, yeah. And it was really a matter, I was going to say whoever had the ball last was going to win, but Ohio State did have the ball last, just kind of ran out of time as far as putting in the
Time
game.
slide.
Yeah, right. But not a lot that you could look at to separate these two teams in that matchup. I mean, they are two of the best, if not the top two programs in the country, the two best teams in the country potentially this year. Kind of a shame that they're having to play this early in the playoff, but also I'm happy that we do get to see them play again, because as I said, that first matchup was epic. There is talent all over the field on both sides of the ball for both of these teams. They're both NFL factories. They both have, regardless of what you want to say about Ryan Day, he's not, as dumb of a coach as people want you to think he is. And they have good coordinators, Chip Kelly on offense. And, then Dan Lanning obviously has really kind of risen to the cream of the class of college football coaching on Oregon's side. So and we have two high-end quarterbacks that have kind of taken advantage of the transfer portal and some extra years of eligibility. They've both been around for seemingly quite a while, in Dylan Gabriel and Howard. But, these guys are experienced. They're seasoned veterans really at the quarterback position, and they have, high-end, fast, speed skill players. So we're not going to see those disadvantages that we were referring to in those last two games. So when Ohio State has the ball on offense, I guess what do you see? What are you looking for? What do you want to see from them?
I think the biggest thing is you look at Ohio State's last two games and take a look at the difference in the game plans used. In the Michigan game, they decided they wanted to try to be the tougher team. And in the Tennessee game, they decided they wanted to be aggressive, get their guys out in space, attack Tennessee's weakness, which was the secondary. And honestly, very clearly, that is the best version of them, is what we saw against the Volunteers in that final first round game. They really caught Tennessee off guard, I think, with how they used some motion and how Tennessee kind of moved their coverages in their secondary. So, and I think it just kind of shocked them. I don't think they just really expected it. One thing is, Ohio State will not have that element of surprise here against Oregon. Not only because we just saw what they did to Tennessee on film from a little more than a week ago, but this is a familiar opponent now, now that we've seen them play. Also, Dan Lanning comes from the tree of Kirby Smart, and we saw Oregon play this, Tennessee team, we saw Oregon play. Oh my God, I can't talk right now. Ohio State played Georgia in the college football playoff a few years ago. Also, Oregon has familiarity with Chip Kelly from his days at UCLA in the Pac-12. Oregon's defensive line did win, I think, the first matchup with the Ohio State offensive line, which we've, often kind of criticized on this show. And they had their guys. They had Simmons, they had McLaughlin, the tackle and center in that first game. And Oregon didn't have one of their best defensive linemen, Birch. And they held up. Now, the offensive line did improve and held up pretty good against a Tennessee pass rush, I respect. But that's something that's on my mind from that first meeting, is that I thought Oregon won that game in the trenches. And honestly, outside of one Henderson explosive, really controlled Ohio State on the ground. They really had to use Will Howard in the run game, and we saw Jeremiah Smith and Ibuka have big games out there. The other thing is, I thought Will Howard actually played, despite the missed time slide we joked about earlier. I thought Will Howard played his best game of the season in that first meeting. Very efficient as a passer in that game. Great on early throws. I believe he was 19 to 20 on short throws. Tons of good yards. Got it outside to Smith and Mbuka. So I think we'll have some success here. And Oregon has a top 5 pass defense, and we saw some success there. So I don't see why anything would change there on that. This matchup, I mean, we've seen it before. I think we see a lot of the same.
Well, and you talked about Jeremiah Smith, in that Tennessee game, they decided for some reason, still inexplicably, to just decide to try to bottle him up with man coverage and just go one-on-one, and just got absolutely cooked all night long. Still kind of unsure what the thought process was there, but it did not work. So that's not somebody that you can just plan to just contain with man-to-man coverage, and leave one corner out there to dry, hanging out there to dry. But, as you said, Oregon does have better pass defense. But, they always put a corner or two into the NFL draft, it seems, almost every year. But, another thing that I was kind of thinking about is earlier on in the season, Oregon was winning games, but they weren't blowing teams out. This is early. And remember, I remember Idaho, we kind of, Boise. Idaho, right. Like we had some conversations of, man, like what are we seeing here? Because we both had super high expectations of Oregon. I mean, we expected them to be exactly where they are right now.
Preseason title pick for me.
Right. I mean, they were, if not the, best team. I mean, we certainly expected them to finish somewhere within that top 5, get to the Big Ten title in all likelihood, win it or at least be the runner-up. So it was kind of concerning to see the way they started the season, and their offense just seemed to be out of rhythm. It just seemed a little bit out of sync now. I don't think these are concerns anymore. That Ohio State game was a game that I think they kind of put a lot of those concerns to rest, and they never really looked back. I mean, it was just kind of full speed ahead, full throttle the rest of the way. Really impressive what we saw from that offense from that point forward. So what are you looking for here, I guess, against this, tough Ohio State defense? Is very formidable Ohio State defensive front. What do you look for when Oregon has the ball?
Yeah. The Ohio State defensive counting stats are impressive. I believe Oregon's the only team they allowed more than 17 points to all year. But yeah, this Oregon offense really did get going after a slow start against the aforementioned Idaho. And yeah, they put up 37 against Boise in week 2, but they had 2 special teams touchdowns in that game. So that's kind of a less number, kind of a fool's gold, 37 a little bit. And then, Oregon State, they outmatched, but a couple other games, but like I said, really saw them get going later in the year, and they have put up they put up 32 against Ohio State, a really good team, put up 45 against Oregon as well, or Penn State, sorry. So that's a really huge offense foul, but Dillon Gabriel also was learning a new offense, learning his new weapons, and like I said, coming out of camp, Oregon had some offensive line issues that affected them in their first couple weeks of the year, and they started to get healthy at that Oregon State game in week 3, first one where they really put up 49 points against a team they were overmatched. They overwhelmed. In the first meeting, we saw the Ohio State corners, which I actually think is the weak point of the Ohio State defense. The safeties are great, but the corners are something I question a little bit. We saw Tej Johnson and Evan Stewart hit some big plays in that first meeting. I think Johnson's one of the more underrated wide receivers in the country, and Johnson was actually not on the field for a couple of games that Oregon's offense performed the worst in. Also, kind of watching that Tennessee Ohio State game back, I thought Nico had some opportunities and some bigger plays down the field, but the pass rush of Ohio State, I think Sawyer and JTT on the defensive line had their best games of the year in that game against the Vols, and kind of shook Nico a little bit, and they just couldn't get going. But I think this Ohio State secondary can get got, and I think it will. We saw James, the running back, who's one I really like, also have a good game in the first meeting against the Buckeyes. And, this is when you get to these big games, you'll start to see quarterbacks in the run game. Dillon Gabriel's very efficient, but I think we'll start to get him going in the run game. And ultimately what that does is that allows it's a little bit of an easy button. It's an efficiency glitch. A lot of times quarterback runs, especially off scrambles, are some of the most efficient plays you can have, simply because it turns something in, from nothing at times. So that's something I'm looking at there when Oregon has the ball, and think that once again there could be some points here on this side of the ball as well.
Yeah, no, and that's when we see these big heavyweight matchups in the college football playoff, or really like even dating back to kind of some of the BCS bowl matchups. I've even teams that have elite high end defenses, what we kind of tend to see is good offense still beats good defense, and when both teams have really good offenses and really good defenses, it just turns into a high scoring shootout. And it's just too hard to stop teams whenever they have high powered offenses like that. No matter how good your defense is, it's just kind of too hard to stop unless you're constantly getting pressure on the quarterback. So with that in mind, I kind of what have we seen as far as that from the market perspective, like the betting market? We obviously see what we're sitting at now, 2.5, 55, but what are the sharps, or I guess what is the money moves telling us from the market perspective?
Yeah, there's some instant Ohio State money, a little bit from like an open of 1.5 to 2, 2.5. Like it's not much. That's 2's not necessarily, a huge key number or anything, but this is kind of one of those games where it can't really touch 3. I know I will be excited to bet the Ducks plus, if +3 -110 or -115 shows. That won't last very long. If you see that, you can go ahead and take that. I know I'd be more on that side, but I also know some people who would love to take, if Oregon money comes in here at 2.5, and you can lay Ohio State -120 on the money line. So, guys, I think there'll be some buyback that way as well. So I think this is kind of exactly where this game lives, in this 2.5 kind of dead range on that. Now, one thing we have seen is movement on the total. That's been a one-way street going up. I think there were soft openers at 52. I think the more official opener was 53.5 range, and obviously we're currently sitting at just above one of the biggest keys in college football, 55 and 55.5. So it's blown through that. And quite frankly, I think we'll handshake agree on this one, but best bet over here. If you can find a 55, get that. Don't buy points on totals. Don't do that. But 55.5. Either one's good. For grading purposes, I'll say it's 55.5 right now. But yeah, that's probably one of my favorite bets of this round of the playoffs, along with that Texas team total we already mentioned.
Yeah, I not to give out stale numbers or anything, I got in pretty early on the opener here. I did take the 52.5. I went over because, like I said, I just felt that I was almost looking for it. I was waiting to see what the total was in this matchup because
I went to bed. I went to bed. You were waiting for that opener. Usually it's flipped.
We had 63 points in this first matchup.
And left some points on the board.
Right. And as I said, this was kind of before both of these offenses were really humming the way that they are right now. It was early enough in the season that these teams were still kind of figuring out, it was 2 quarterbacks that were in new systems and in new offenses. So I just already felt strongly about that. So yeah, I hit that 52.5. Maybe could have gone a little bit harder there, but it's gone up 3 points. And as you say, you still see a little bit of value there, even with where it is right now. So outside of that, I can't say that I feel strongly about who's going to come out ahead here, just because these teams are just too evenly matched. It's going to be maybe something weird, some type of weird turnover happens, maybe some team goes for 4th down, or there's going to be some type, right? And I feel like and Dan Lanning is super aggressive sometimes to the detriment. I mean, it cost them some games last year against Washington. And, it's also won them some games from time to time when they go for it. So I don't know. That's kind of what I feel like this is going to come down to.
Yeah, and kind of interjecting on kind of the title race here. You look at national title odds a little bit, but right now you'll see Texas as the favorite, and then followed by Oregon and Ohio State. And the simple reason for that is right now is that Oregon and Ohio State have to beat the other one to get to the next round, and Texas is a 13-point favorite over Arizona State right now. So they're more likely to make the semifinal in that game when Texas plays, or potentially Texas plays the winner of this game. This is going to be around a coin flip type spread in this range as well. But the winner of this game will be the favorite in the national title market. But they can't be right now because this game hasn't been played yet.
Right. I was just going to say that.
The biggest threat to each one is each other. And I think this is a quite frankly like a national title quality matchup on paper, and we're getting it here in the quarterfinals. And what an awesome, we're going to get it 5 p.m. New Year's Day. Like I'll go nostalgia here for college football here. Having a game like this at that venue, that's what it's all about. I'm very excited that this game is at that venue on that day, and really looking forward to this one. It's crown jewel of the sport.
Yeah, it's a Rose Bowl matchup we've seen before, so it's kind of good to see this. I would have hated to see the, like the Arizona State Texas game be in the Rose Bowl.
It would have felt.
It just wouldn't really feel right. These two teams being there just kind of feels right as far as a traditional Rose Bowl, for whatever that's worth. But yeah, no, I mean, these are, like I said, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, these are the two best teams in the country. So, instead of all the people that want to complain about them having to play in this round, just be happy, at least unless you're a fan of Ohio State or Oregon, which, to be fair, I haven't heard a whole lot of griping from either one of those sides. But, a lot of the griping seems to be coming from other people, but, just complaining about the format. I don't know. I'm happy we get to see it. I will be locked in to, as we said, the granddaddy of them all. So moving on into the final game here in the college football playoff quarterfinals, the Sugar Bowl, Notre Dame facing Georgia. We saw Notre Dame kind of win pretty convincingly over Indiana at home in the first game. This time around, a little bit of a stiffer matchup. Georgia Bulldogs, the total sitting at 45.5. We already know Georgia has ruled their quarterback, Carson Beck, out, not only for this game, but for the rest of the playoffs. He's done. So I guess we don't entirely know what to expect from them at the quarterback position. But, I think we still kind of know, we've come to know what to expect from Georgia, at least from everything that we've seen from them under Kirby Smart has been pretty consistent. So despite the quarterback being out, which, to be honest, it's not like he looked that great this year to begin with. So not sure what you, what are you looking for, I guess, kind of on Georgia's side of the ball with Stockton coming in here at quarterback. Great quarterback name, Gunnar Stockton, but just not really sure. Not sure what to expect from him, I guess, at the Sugar Bowl. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think it was obviously pretty known, and we saw that UCL injury, at the end of that first half against Texas there, and it was very clear, like, oh, that's bad, and he's probably out. I do think it's kind of funny that, like, people who watch sports see certain injuries, and we have no medical background at all, but we're like, oh, that's that, he's out. And it seems like, the thousands of people watching that game kind of instantly knew he was out. And so obviously Georgia just announced that it will be Gunnar Stockton. Carson Beck's out, and Beck also declared himself for the NFL draft, so his college career is over. And of course, best of luck to him rehabbing and hope all is well there. But Gunnar Stockton, he came in the second half of the Texas game, 71 yards on 12 completions. It's a very low ADOT. Didn't have to do much. Obviously, that game went to overtime. They kind of barely hung on in that one. But again, we've talked about it a couple times here in multiple of these games. The bye was an advantage here. We've known, it's not going to be back. He's had 3 weeks of practice to prepare for this. And so I think that's good for him, going forward. Obviously, he was recruited well enough to go to Georgia. So there is some baseline here. And Carson Beck hadn't had that good of a season to begin with. I mean, preseason, you asked me what the drop-off between Beck and Stockton is. I'm going to tell you, 5-6 points. And that's not what the market did here. It's half that. Maybe a little bit, more than half. But the big thing here is actually an injury on the other side of the ball. Riley Mills, defensive tackle for Notre Dame, actually also their best pass rusher. He's going to be out. That gives Georgia some major rushing advantages in a game with a quarterback where they already might be looking to want to go on the ground more. Georgia's offensive line across the unit, by the way, it's one of the healthiest it's been all season. Again, bye helps. But it averages 317 pounds across the line. The Notre Dame defensive line right now, as dogs barking right now for Georgia.
I was going to say the dogs are already barking.
I don't know if it's for the underdog or for the Bulldogs, but my dog is not a Bulldog, so but he's barking. Notre Dame's defensive line, 277-pound average across their 2 deep. That's a 40-pound average difference in the trench. In a game, like I said, but they're already going to want to run the ball more, and whatnot there. So additionally, like I said, Georgia's line's getting a bit healthier. Now, Georgia did lose backup running back Roger Robertson officially for the year, which I just think that's going to lead to more bell cow work for Trevor Etienne. More on that a little bit later. But I think as far as the passing game goes, all year we've kind of seen how much the Bulldogs and their impact on the NFL really miss Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers as underneath weapons. We really haven't seen this talented Georgia receiving corps kind of have anyone step up. They've had some drops issues throughout the year. But the Notre Dame pass defense is really good in man coverage, and I still like the corners, but they don't have that top end talent without Morrison. Again, really good unit, and had great stats throughout the year, but lack of good passing offenses face. I still question that. They play a lot of man coverage, with Notre Dame does. So this is a real step up in class, despite me thinking that Georgia's receivers are underwhelming. That's going to be something I note here. And Al Golden, the defensive coordinator, he runs an NFL style defense back from his days. I think that defense will really try to confuse Stockton in the passing game. So I think it really comes down to how Georgia's running game works here. Not a really good unit, kind of with up the middle runs on the year, but they're going to have some opportunities with some holes at defensive tackle for the Irish.
Yeah, no, for sure. And Notre Dame has played pretty good defense for the most part, but they certainly, Indiana didn't have much space to operate. But this is not Indiana anymore. I mean, these guys are much, much bigger, stronger, and faster than the challenge that Indiana put out there. I mean, we saw that Notre Dame certainly physically manhandled Indiana, but that will not be the case here in this game. So, it sounds like, I don't know what does concern me with is, like you said, the short passing from Stockton and the ADOT from him that we saw, because it's not like he's not like this completely different style of quarterback where they have to change the offense on the fly of swapping him in for Beck. I mean, as we said, Beck has, dare I say, he's even looked pretty bad at certain times this year.
Yes.
Stockton isn't like, oh, now we're switching to a running quarterback. I mean, they're essentially the same style of player. So it's not like they're switching up the offense. I mean, they should have really, in theory, been running the same deal. And much like, seeing when Texas puts Arch Manning in, he's not just throwing little dink and dunk passes. I mean, he's kind of letting it rip downfield. So it is concerning, although, it was unexpected coming in, but we've seen at other times, even going back when Tua came in for Bama, he's letting it rip down the field, as the backup. So I just don't, it is concerning in a game that I guess maybe you can make the argument it wasn't the most meaningful game. Maybe not, but I mean, if they lost, they were probably out. But
yeah, there might have been. I mean,
maybe they were just kind of trying to. I guess saying not the most meaningful. I guess I meant from a lot of these championships didn't kind of hold the same weight that they did in the past. But I don't know. That to me, that's a little concerning. I think I could see Georgia maybe just trying to bully their way through this, run the ball heavy, and just hope that they can kind of push Notre Dame around. But I don't know. I guess that's on one side. So on the Notre Dame side of the ball, to be honest, against Indiana, they didn't do a whole lot offensively. They had one big 98-yard run.
One play.
Yeah, that really inflates what your offensive output looks like. But despite really kind of controlling the game, they didn't do a whole lot offensively. So what are you looking for from the Notre Dame offensive side of the field?
I think the first thing I think about is how Georgia defends mobile quarterbacks. I think about the Georgia Tech game with Haynes King. I think about the Alabama game with Jalen Milroe. Leonard's legs are going to be a key. Both those games were either losses by Georgia or game they got really far behind in and had to go to 8 overtimes. Additionally, Riley Leonard's one of the best quarterbacks in the country as far as sack avoidance. Now, what he does after he avoids the sack, I don't know, but he's really good at avoiding sacks. The other thing to consider, Notre Dame, not a great late down offense. It's going to be vital for them to get and maintain kind of standard downs, maintain, down and distance where they could both run and pass to keep that Georgia defense on its heels and just kind of so they can't either sit back in zone that they like to play or kind of attack the ground game of Jeremiah Love. So they'll need to stay. So can Georgia or Notre Dame, who wins first down? Ultimately, by the way, with apologies to Ashton Jeanty, who we talked about earlier, I think Jeremiah Love's fantastic. I think he's one of the best backs in the country. And that's solely a compliment to Love. That's nothing against Jeanty. But I do expect Kirby Smart's defense and focus their efforts on Love. Challenge the Notre Dame wide receivers to win one-on-one. Something we've long questioned whether that room can win one-on-one on the outside. Now this year, this wide receiver unit's better than years past, where it was really rough in South Bend for that. But still, Georgia's corners, there's lots of talent on that side. Can these Notre Dame receivers win one-on-one? The Notre Dame offensive line has done a poor job against defensive line stunts specifically. So, and Georgia also like to sit in some zone coverage as well. So if they use these stunts, sit in zone against passing downs, Leonard's not as good. Also in zone coverage, the defense faces the quarterback. So when he scrambles around, again, Riley Leonard's legs, you have your eyes on him. Whereas man coverage, a lot of times your back's turned, all that. Leonard is better against man coverage than zone, so kind of fits playing that kind of style against him as well. So I think it all comes down to first down on that. And then lastly, we talked about with one playoff team already, and we talked about their field goal woes. Well, they were the second worst team in kicking. Notre Dame was the worst. Notre Dame kicking inconsistency once again, 10 of 21 on field goals. That field goal percentage is 134 out of 134 in the country in that. So that's something to consider here in a game that is very much a coin flip, per the point spread. That's going to matter. This game, very well. It is very well possible this game comes down to a Notre Dame field goal, and no one has any idea if they can make it at any distance.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You mentioned Jeremiah Love at running back, and it's something that I think, Notre Dame obviously always kind of gets credit for the tight ends, for the offensive linemen that they've put into the NFL, but really they've had some pretty, respectable, very good running backs that they've put in. I mean, Kyron Williams is a guy that wasn't really, I mean, I wouldn't say he was unheralded in college, but he wasn't at the top of anybody's draft boards or like really talked about as like, oh my God, you got to get to a Notre Dame game and see Kyron Williams. But, ever since he's been in with the Rams, he has been, exceptional from the backfield. So, and I mean, that's just one example. I know there's certainly other guys that they kind of just always seem to have, in addition to having good offensive line, they just have good running schemes and athletic guys at the tailback position. So I guess, when this game opened, everybody kind of already knew that Beck was going to be out. What has the market kind of indicated to us in this game as far as any type of line movement that we've seen?
Yeah, I think you brought up the main point here. So something to consider immediately is that the market was aware that Beck was going to be out immediately upon the market open. It was open with that assumption. You even saw some Notre Dame minus immediately. I think the market quickly kind of corrected that to just flipping ones. Again, that moves through zero doesn't mean a lot. Again, similar to the Oregon Ohio State game, I don't think we can see a 3 here at all. With Notre Dame, I think that'll get bought up immediately. So I think we'll live between in this 2.5 range. Cheap money. I think Georgia will stay a favorite. I think there's enough kind of money wanting to hold them up, but I do think there could be some sharp Notre Dame money on game day as well. But I think it'll just live kind of here and not move too much. One move that has been interesting that, quite frankly, I disagree with is the move on the total. We saw mostly 44.5s all last week. And if you look at the board now, 45, 45.5. There's even a couple books I respect is sitting at 46. That's something I disagree with. I think there's advantages for both defenses that we kind of laid out here in this game. So that's something definitely kind of look at, consider. Obviously, these are bigger moves as we get closer to game day. But yeah, that's one I disagree with. I think 44 was a fair total. And as you kind of get in these mid 40s, it's more of an NFL style total in game. This is where you normally see NFL totals lie. You get a lot of numbers that football numbers can land on, 44, 45, start thinking about common NFL scores. They'll land on those numbers a lot. So yeah, kind of thinking to play back a little bit. We did see some buyback at 46 at a key shot, bumping it back below that 46. But there's a couple still out there.
Yeah, it's really, really hard to get unders to the window in the college game when you have two good teams going against each other, unless you feel that one team is just going to get completely shut down. It's pretty hard. It can be difficult, I guess, to get, unders to the window. But hey, we saw it at Notre Dame and Indiana, two teams that, I think a lot of people might have expected that game to be a little bit higher scoring, and that, but to my point, Indiana got shut down. So I guess that's, unless you feel that one of these two teams is going to get shut down. I mean, at least for me, it's harder to get there, but I don't know. I guess to that point, what are some of the best bets that you like here?
Yeah, as this one, I kind of alluded to it earlier and kind of using a market consensus number here. Trevor Etienne over 83.5 rushing yards. I did get in a little bit better here. I think we're getting close to where it's no longer the buy point on it. I don't think you can. I think 84.5 is actually probably the last number I would get. So I think there's multiple books with 83.5 out there. So I think that's good. There's also some better. I'm kind of giving out the worst available here that I saw. So Trevor Etienne over 83.5 rushing yards. I think that's the best look for this game. And then I will probably play some sort of under here. I don't know whether it's first half or full game. I know one national shop has an under 23.5 in the first half, 23 being a key number in the first half. So maybe look there, maybe grab some of this 46, maybe split that. I will probably end up on something there. But when you're thinking about these, all the bets we kind of gave out today. The Ohio State Oregon game's a lot stronger. The Texas team total's a lot stronger. The ETN prop is stronger. This under 45.5 and 23.5 is probably the weakest one of the ones I've kind of given out here tonight.
Yeah, sure. So I, again, not giving out a best bet or anything here, but I also got in with the ETN total there. I grabbed it somewhat early at 74.5 on the over. So, think we still both feel pretty good about the possibility of him maybe getting it into the 90s, maybe clearing 100 there on the rushing totals. So,
I have no clue who's going to win the game. We kind of talked about Oregon. Okay, I kind of like Oregon at 3, whatever, but I don't really have a feel on the winner of that game. I think that's a coin flip. I'm even less sure here. I think this is a really fascinating handicap with Stockton being out, the different advantages for the defense, and how both can play each other. Kind of, I'm really not sure who to win. I really thought going into as Notre Dame was kind of beating up on Indiana a bit, I was like, I'm gonna have a strong opinion on this game, and you get here, you do the handicapping, and you're like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. So I really wish I had a side in this game, but I think it's not going to be the spectacle that the Rose Bowl is going to be, but I think this is one of the most fascinating games of the college slate, and one of the more fascinating matches we could have gotten.
Yeah, right.
Overall.
Because, I think in prior years, I would have just always automatically defaulted to Georgia by margin. It's like, hey, this is what we see from Notre Dame. Once they get swimming in the deep waters with the big boys, they can't hang anymore. This isn't Purdue. This isn't, the service academies anymore, but
Actually, I think if it was back, I would probably have a Notre Dame bet.
Really? How many points do you think he's worth? At least, how many points do you think he's worth, and how many points does the market think he's worth?
I think right now it's like a couple, like 2.5, 3.
Yeah.
It's like I think Georgia would probably be like a juice 2.5 or 3 if it was back. And then I think I'd like Notre Dame at 3.
Yeah,
if that was the case.
Wow. So you like this to be a close game, I guess.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it is.
Gunnar Stockton's such an unknown.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say this isn't like the dominant force. This isn't just like the normal dominant force that we're used to seeing from Georgia. I mean, they have looked dominant at times. I mean, they certainly have been impressive in 2 matchups against Texas, and they still kind of rely pretty heavily on their defensive line. But offensively, I just kind of haven't seen much. They just haven't been. And that's even with Beck. I can't imagine that Stockton's going to be a significant upgrade here, just because if he was that much better, he'd be out there playing. So I don't know. I have concerns about this Georgia offense, I guess. But
another thing too, and I'm pulling it up now. Georgia, 87th in the country here in first half points. We've seen them start slow in a lot of games. Offensively, throughout the whole season. Actually, the entire Mike Bobo era as offensive coordinator at Georgia, someone who I'm not a huge fan of. I do think Notre Dame has a coaching advantages with Golden and Freeman on the defensive side for Notre Dame and versus Bobo for Georgia. But yeah, Georgia has had a propensity to start slow in a lot of these games too. So could be a good opportunity to maybe get in live on Georgia at halftime. Making some adjustments and whatnot, but that I wouldn't be surprised, if you see, 9-7 Notre Dame lead or something, kind of going into the break because of that, possible slow start and each team kind of feeling each other out.
Right. So, all right. Well, we will take one last look before we wrap here. We're going to take one more look here in the matchup. So, just kind of looking ahead, who do you like to meet? I know we still have 2 more rounds to go, but who do you like now with the teams that we have left, the 8 teams remaining? Who, I guess, do you like to make it to the national championship?
I will. So it's going to be not a huge strong conviction on the left side of the bracket here, because I think the three best teams in the country
Yeah,
are on that
yeah.
side. And obviously, two of those teams will have to win two of the games against the other to beat two of them to get there potentially. Apologies to our friends in Tempe, but I definitely have Texas advancing there. I'll take Oregon just because they've been a little bit more the consistent team compared to Ohio State. I guess from a bracket perspective, again, not a strong feel. And then I think I would like Oregon without doing matchup stuff. Oregon over Texas, so we'll put them in the final there. And then you know what? I'll take the Irish. I'll do that for the bracket. I'll just do that. Just kind of questioning Gunner Stockton there, and then obviously we'll take Penn State, and then we'll end up with we'll go Oregon over Notre Dame.
Wow.
But again,
Well,
we have two games here that are a huge coin flip that matters a lot.
yeah, for sure.
I would also take Ohio State over Texas and Georgia over Penn State. If we got there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you could
No, I
very
know.
well get
That's what
Ohio
kind of
State,
makes it
Georgia.
so unique is that, for all the complaining and whining about the first round matchups and the blowouts and the seeding and whatever, it as we kind of get closer in, this kind of starts to get, significantly more interesting as, we still do have two big numbers out there on the board, but two games that are coin flips.
And my bracket's subject to change, by the way. Even if
yeah. I was going to say, right. I was going to say, we'll still run it back. We're going to run this thing back again after we see what happens this weekend. Maybe look at even, maybe we'll do something and look at some openers depending on what happens. And if we like anything early, maybe we'll jump in and just do a normal preview like we are here when we're down to the Final Four, which I guess we can call it that now. But technically the college football Final Four, but
I guess the real Final Four too.
Oh yeah. That's definitely coming down the line. Any other closing thoughts, or maybe just odd, any other bowl games? I mean, we have a full slate tomorrow. Not to put you on the spot here, but maybe anything that sticks out to you, or anything that you already like for tomorrow, or just kind of any of the non-playoff bowls.
Actually, I have personally a big slate tomorrow on that one. Numbers are moved, so it's kind of hard to give them out. So I would scale these back a bit. So understand that I got numbers on other side of key numbers, but I bet Alabama 13.5 over Michigan tomorrow morning. That's noon. That's a noon start on the East Coast. Now it's 14.5, 15 in some spots. I would consider maybe, if depending on what you could find, an Alabama team total over or a Michigan team total under. That would be the way I would play it at current if you want to follow kind of what I'm betting. I think Washington's the side in the Sun Bowl, but I have not bet that game at all against Louisville. ACC 0-10 against the spread, against the consensus close in bowl season, and 1-9 straight up. The one win with Syracuse beating Wazoo, who was down like 20 guys in the portal. They won by 17 and didn't cover the 18.5 close. By the way, in that game, I laid 6.5. So the game had an enormous move there. I bet Baylor 2.5. That's now on the other side of 3. Still lean that way on Baylor. LSU has a ton of guys out. Nussmeier's playing. So I like Baylor there. Other bowls after the playoff ones, not too much there. Virginia Tech's going to be decimated. They're going to have like 14 starters out. I don't know who's playing quarterback. PJ Fleck loves to take bowl games seriously, but now you're getting a Minnesota team laying more than a touchdown. I don't know if I would touch that now, but I certainly would not bet Virginia Tech. It's still Minnesota or pass. That probably closes 10. And then the Bahamas Bowl is probably the one at current I still have the biggest opinion on. I do think Buffalo is still good. below the 3 against Liberty. Liberty's quarterback Caden Salters transferred to Colorado. They have some other losses in the transfer portal there. Buffalo is a team that's overachieved, a MAC opponent who I think will take this game seriously. A good coach in Lambo, who's a special teams guy. So I believe how the team buttoned up, really overachieved. So I'll lay the 2.5. So from official perspective, non-bowl bet, I'll give out Buffalo minus the 2.5 against Liberty in the Bahamas Bowl at 11 a.m. on Saturday.
Love that.
Also, if you're betting the Bahamas Bowl, always check the wind there. Always check the wind in the Bahamas Bowl.
Yeah, I know. That's Saturday the 4th. Is that Saturday the 4th? The days are so confusing right now. I mean, I know on the 2nd, which is a Thursday, I have Ole Miss, which I don't even know. I doubt this number's out there still, but
no. I don't know what you got, but that one's moved.
I did take a two-way parlay, or a 2-team parlay, 2 legs, I should say. I laid Ole Miss 13.5 and the over 50.5. And then I also took
17 and 51.5. So
yeah. And I took, which I think I might have bought a point or two there, but it's still, I didn't buy that. I mean, I also took Ole Miss on over 34.5 team total. I believe I bet those during the Ohio State. Yeah, because when Lane was just getting dunked on left and right, and we already know. I mean, here's the thing, and it's a real thing with him in not only, but especially in bowl games, but in like other, he plays for the over. I mean, we know this.
I feel like he does. Yeah.
We know this because not only does he,
he shows up.
His on-field, right? I was gonna say his on-field actions indicate that, and he has like kind of made some cryptic tweets from time to time about it as well. So I could see a little bit of rage, maybe some frustration let out there by Lane. I feel like I could see them trying to run up the score, keep scoring,
That's the all-time though. Wouldn't it be hilarious though, with how bad the ACC's been? Him criticizing SMU and Indiana. He's playing an ACC team in a bowl game. If that's the all-time, wouldn't it Duke as a backup quarterback? Like, wouldn't it be hilarious if Duke is up or close in this game in halftime? Twitter is going to be a fun place to be. Twitter X, whatever you want to call it. That's I'm hoping Duke could keep it close at least for a half, and then let you cash your bets in the second half. But just so we can see some fire, some funny tweets mid-second quarter or something.
Oh yeah,
if Duke has a 17-13 lead, get the eyeball emojis going just for fun and whatnot.
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, yeah, speaking of which, make sure that you give Bob a follow at BobbyDigital2. There he is on Twitter. One of the sharpest minds that you'll find on the bird tweeting stuff out. So looking forward to doing more of these. Like we said, we will be back in some capacity, whether that be on openers or just a preview like this for the Final Four, and then probably maybe some NFL playoff stuff. Who knows? We might be just kind of keep this rolling a little bit. So appreciate your time, Bob. Appreciate everybody for giving us a watch, and we will see you next time.